All right, let's dive into something huge. We're going to talk about a concept that really, it defines the very air we breathe. It's the world we've built, it's how we see ourselves, it's all wrapped up in this single powerful word, modernity.
You know, we throw this word modern around all the time, right? Modern art, modern medicine, modern life. But what do we actually mean when we say that? It seems simple on the surface, but underneath, there's this whole revolutionary set of ideas that just completely re-engineered human society.
So to get our bearings, let's start with this really clean, simple definition from the historian Yuval Noah Harari. At its absolute core, modernity is a promise. It's this incredible belief that we humans are not just stuck repeating the past. Instead, we can use science, we can use economics to actively go out and build a better future. That's the engine behind everything. Now, to really get this, we're going to break it down. We'll start with that core belief in progress. Then we'll see how that belief basically required us to invent a whole new concept of time itself. From there, we'll look at how our very idea of truth changed, how all of this reshapes you personally, and finally, we're going to wrestle with the central paradox modernity leaves us with: a world just swimming in doubt.
Okay, first up, this absolutely radical, world-changing idea of progress. You have to understand, before the modern era, the general vibe was that the golden age was somewhere back in the past. Modernity came along and just flipped that script completely.
So you've got these thinkers during the Enlightenment, the folks compiling these massive encyclopedias, and they do something that's a total game changer. They look at all of human history and they organize it into a single story, a universal narrative. And what was the plot of that story? Constant upward progress. History wasn't just a list of things that happened anymore. It became a force moving in a very specific, very desirable direction.
But here's the thing. To even believe in progress, you first need a concept of time that makes room for it. I know that sounds obvious to us now, but it was a massive shift in how humans thought.
Historian Reinhard Koselleck had a name for this: historical time. It's the idea that time is like an arrow. It flies from a past we can learn from, through a present where we can act, and into a future we can actually shape. This new concept was huge because it turned history from just a record of the past into a powerful political tool you could use to justify revolutions and build entirely new societies based on a vision for the future.
And this quote from Ernst Cassirer, man, it just perfectly captures that spirit. It's asking, hey, why should tradition get the right of primogeniture? You know, the right of the firstborn son to inherit everything. Why should tradition get to rule us? The Enlightenment's wild answer was that human reason is older. It's more fundamental, and it has a much better claim to be in charge. It was like a declaration of independence from the past. Okay, so if we're going to use reason to build a better future, we need a solid way to figure out what's true. And this led to another modern revolution, turning the spotlight back on ourselves and asking, wait a minute, how do we even know what we think we know? This is where historian Peter Burke really hits the nail on the head. See, the idea that our society shapes our beliefs wasn't totally new, but modernity was the first time we started to study this systematically. It was the birth of what we'd now call the sociology of knowledge. And you can see the early seeds of this in guys like Francis Bacon, who was warning about the idols, or biases, that mess with our thinking, or Giambattista Vico, who pointed out how we all have this arrogance of nations, ethnocentrism, and Montesquieu, who made these groundbreaking connections between a country's climate and its laws. They were all circling this crucial modern idea. Truth isn't just something out there waiting to be found. It gets filtered through our messy, human social context.
And this whole shift had a really practical impact. As the scholars Novaes and Forcieri point out, before this, history was kind of its own isolated thing. But in modern history, it became fundamentally interdisciplinary. It started talking to sociology, to economics, to psychology. The new thinking was, hey, to understand the past, you have to understand all the social forces that make people tick.
Okay, so we've been talking about these huge kind of abstract ideas: progress, linear time, social knowledge. But this next part is where it gets really personal, because modernity isn't just a historical concept. It reaches right into our daily lives and fundamentally changes who you are.
The sociologist Anthony Giddens gave us this brilliant 5-point breakdown. First, modernity is just intensely dynamic. There's more change happening faster than ever before. Second, it radically alters not just society, but our personal day-to-day lives. And third, it weaves these huge, large-scale institutions, like the global economy, directly into our sense of self. Think about how that affects your personal career choices. Fourth, it connects global trends to your local personal life. And finally, while it reduces old risks like, say, famine for a lot of people, it creates entirely new ones, from nuclear war to climate change. The key takeaway is you're living and breathing modernity every single day.
So, this brings us to our final stop, and honestly, it's maybe the most challenging piece of this whole puzzle. Modernity kicked off with this grand promise of finding certainty through reason, but it ended up leading us somewhere completely unexpected.
To put this in perspective, historian Peter Burke kind of frames the birth of this era from about 1450 to 1750. It starts with Gutenberg's printing press, which let ideas spread like wildfire, and ends around the time of Diderot's Great Encyclopedia, which tried to gather all of human knowledge in one place. This was the period when that promise of rational certainty was shining its brightest.
But here's the twist, and it's a huge one, again from Anthony Giddens. He says, yes, we successfully broke free from the old certainties of tradition and religion, but we did not replace them with the absolute, rock-solid certainty of rational knowledge that we were hoping for. So, what did we get instead?
We got doubt. The very tool we use to take apart tradition, critical reason, is a tool that, by its very nature, has to question everything. It questions authority, it questions assumptions, and eventually it even starts to question itself. And that constant questioning, that doubt, it leaks out of the philosophy books and seeps into our everyday lives, becoming this fundamental part of what it means to be modern.
And that, right there, is the central paradox we're all living with. The massive project to replace superstition with clear, rational certainty somehow created a world where everything feels up for grabs. It's a world of incredible progress, for sure, but it's also a world of deep, existential doubt. And figuring out why that is, well, that might just be the most modern question of all.